Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Enlightening Your Way. I'm your host, Nancy Lombardo. We are airing on the Lilydale Assembly official Facebook page and YouTube channel. I'm a year-round resident here at Lilydale and the president of the Church Living Spirit, which is an independent spiritualist church here in Lilydale. I'm a military veteran, retired police detective, and fitness and yoga is my passion. This show is a combination of many life experiences that feature various topics and guests to help enrich one's mind, body, and soul on your pathway to healthy living. My Facebook page, Wellness with Nancy Lombardo, where my motto is protecting and serving your well-being. And I'm so excited to introduce our guest to today. Tiffany Harelik is a best-selling author, professional astrologer, retreat director, spiritual development teacher, and professional beekeeper based in Texas. Tiffany loves sharing the secret world of bees and the connection between soil, health, and honey with others in the wellness arena. The bees called to her in 2019, and she has been stewarding them ever since. And you can enjoy a bee retreat with her in Texas, listen to her podcast, or adopt a rescue colony and receive honey monthly. Tiffany is also the founder of Spellbound Publishers and a yoga instructor, which I love. Tiffany's guidance is a light that the world is fortunate to have. And for everything else, you can find out about Tiffany at haciendaharlick.com and tiffanyharlick.com. Welcome.
Thank
So
you, Nancy.
I know,
I'm
so
so
many of my
glad to be
shows.
here. Yeah.
Thank you. So many of my shows have talked about mediumship and healing, and I'm so glad to finally incorporate the wellness part that I've wanted to talk about for so long. And I thought, what the perfect opportunity when I saw, I've been following you and your bees, and I told you I'm deathly afraid, scared to death of bees, and the fact that you put so you're gonna have to tell me all about the bees and get me past this, whatever it is that I have with the bees. But my first question is, you said that they called you in 2019. What does that mean?
Bees, I guess everybody has their own experience of feeling that call or feeling a pull. For me, a lot of times people that are drawn to bees are in some kind of grief work. They're in a season of grieving, mourning. They're in a season of deep healing. Some of my closest bee friends, most of them have some sort of cancer story or overcoming a significant near-death experience. And so that I have found that to be a commonality. That's not the case for every beekeeper, right? But for me, right, beekeepers represent those messengers from this world to the next. They have a connection with the afterlife. They have a connection with the spiritual realm, and they have a connection with messages. You've heard of the lore of telling the bees, and I have found that to be a really interesting practice. So telling the bees is when we go say, hey, somebody in the family has passed on. We want you to carry their memory in your wings, or hey, somebody's getting married, or hey, somebody's having a baby. I caretake many different properties of bees, and one of them had a death last year, and almost all of the colonies suffered. And I hadn't put it together, but one of my beekeeping friends, I said, what is going on with this yard? I'm like trying to figure it out. And she said, I wonder if anybody told them that their owner died. And so I
Oh,
I did. And Nancy, it was
oh,
like the turnaround. They just turned around. I could see all of the queens, everything that was wrong turned around. And so there's some sort of intelligence or knowledge that goes along with very sentient creatures. And so what does it mean when somebody calls or you feel called to the bees? It's kind of my long-winded approach or answer of saying there's usually a grief story, there's usually something else going on, and I didn't know it at the time. So at the time, 2019, my mom had passed. I didn't associate that grief or that mourning with bees until much later, until I started connecting some of the other cosmic dots. But yeah, that for me, it's like you just get curious, you get interested, and it's something that you just can't put down, you can't look away from, and then you realize there's so much more to the story than just these little insects that are pollinating our food. They're ecosystems, they are a super organism, the way they communicate, the way that they advance through their life cycle, it just gets fascinating and fascinating.
I'm fascinated just to hear that. I've never heard this before, that it incorporated with grief and healing. I've never heard of that. That's
Yeah.
fascinating to me.
Yeah.
How did you go about learning everything you needed to know about to even start this?
Well, you know what's kind of wild about beekeeping is you would think it's like owning a dog or owning a horse or owning a, like having some sort of agricultural tie. You would think that there would be like a process, start here, get here, this is what happens, this is how you handle that. And nothing could be further from the truth. Every beekeeper has a different way of handling their bees. It is very frustrating when you're getting started because one person says this, another person says this, and it's, you would think that there would be some straightforward path, but most of the answers are it depends. So how did I get started? I did a year-long apprenticeship with a woman, and then I did a separate year-long apprenticeship with a different woman. And then I started forming my own opinions. I went to all of the conferences. I joined the local clubs. I volunteered. I was of service. I led youth groups for bees. I did everything that one can do. I started with the Texas Master Beekeeper program to understand the science and the research. I get all the magazines, I just jumped all the way in. You find out which YouTube channels resonate with you and which ones don't. But one of the reasons that I feel like really, I don't know, called or like this is a unique moment for my career is that most of the literature and science that comes from for bees comes from New York, comes from Cornell with that area. And so
Oh,
we're in a very different area. We have very different climate. Our bees have different needs. But the mainstream literature doesn't really address our area or our growing season. And so one of the things that I wanted to do with my work was to address beekeeping by growing region, by gardening zone. And at least there will be some kind of common ground where, maybe your technique doesn't work for me, but maybe you have an idea based on our foliage and our growing season and our soil health and things that will work better in this region than maybe what I'm finding just by looking online or mainstream. So that's
so do you start
that's
off like with one queen bee? I mean, how does it start? How did you start? See, I know nothing.
That's great. Yeah. So if you were trying to get started in beekeeping, the best time of the year is now, is spring, because they're in their song of increase. So you could start many different ways. You can buy a nuke, which is a family of bees that already has an established queen that's going to be laying eggs. And you've got food, you've got brood, you've got nectar sources, and it's just a little family that's ready to go in the frames that you want to put into your equipment. First of all, you have to figure out which equipment you want, which is a whole other talk. Setting up your apiary is a whole other talk, and the direction and all of the different things. But once you've got your equipment and your apiary set up in place, you're deciding on, do I want to buy a nuke, a little family of bees? Do I want to buy a package of bees, which is just a whole bunch of bees that don't know each other shook into a package, and then a separate queen, and you would dump those and the queen into your equipment. You would then come back 3 to 5 days later, and you want to see, has she been released from her cage? Is she laying eggs? Is she healthy? So you're doing some follow-up checks. And then a third way is that you could catch a swarm, right? You could catch a swarm or do a removal, like do a removal from, let's say that somebody has bees in an area that they don't want. That's what my rescue apiary does, is we'll go rehome those bees so that they're not where you don't want them, and they get to continue to have a positive impact on the ecosystem where we are. So there's lots of ways that you can install the bees in your apiary. But yeah, that once you get going, right, the queen, right, the queen just, without the queen, they can't continue. Their whole point is to reproduce and swarm and get their genetics out there. That's what their goal is. That's what they want to do this time of year. And we're recording in the spring. So the spring is their on-ramping period, right? So with the queen, she's going to live 5 or 6 years, maybe 12 or 13. Some beekeepers have outlandish numbers. Some beekeepers replace their queen every single year, just like the people that raise chickens, right? You have
How
a
long did you
hen. Some will live 12 to 13 years, but a
wow.
lot of beekeepers won't let them they want to replace them sooner
Mhm.
because it's like a chicken that's laying eggs. She starts out kind of slow and then she gets really good at it for a long time. She's laying 2 or 3 eggs, a day or one a day or whatever her max is, and then she tapers off. And so that's the same thing with queen bees is they have a good laying pattern, they're going strong, and then they taper off. So a lot of beekeepers want to replace her with a young queen that is laying in a better pattern. And then there's genetics. There's all kinds of queen rearing genetics, like that you want to have certain genetics in your apiary, right? Everybody wants calm, sweet bees, but they also want big, huge honey producers. And that's
Right.
like saying, well, I want a Labrador, but I really need a Rottweiler, but I actually kind of need a poodle. And so it's like it's hard to get that perfect flow of genetics. And
Wow.
yeah, the queen, the rest of the bees in the summer, their lifespan is much shorter. It's like 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, right? And so those worker bees are going through a series of jobs as they get older. Their first job is nurse bee, and so they're gonna clean out the little baby bee cells and make sure that the eggs are getting fed the right amount of food. They're cleaning up, right? They're the nurse bees, and then as they progress through those 6 weeks of summer life, they're going to take on different roles. They're going to be an undertaker bee, right? They're going to clean the dead out from the hive. And the undertaker bees have their own personalities. They have, some of them will line up the dead, some of them will fly them off, some of them will just boot them out and not care. They have different ways of taking care of their dead.
Wow.
Some of them will be little guard bees at the front, right? Some of them, they progress through these different jobs. Some of them are air conditioning bees. They'll go get a drop of water and beat their wings and make the interior of the hive cooler. And their last job is forager. So the bees that are out flying around are the female worker bees that are foraging, looking for um, their pollen and nectar sources, or they're doing like discovery flights to say, hey, we want to swarm here. And so they're coming back and informing the rest of the colony based on they have dances that they do, they have pheromones, they communicate through smell and through dance, and they make democratic decisions. So a colony of bees weighs about the same amount of a human brain. And there's a really cool book called Honeybee Democracy from Dr. Tom Seeley. He's also out of Cornell. And he has like gone into great detail about how they make these democratic decisions on where they're going to swarm, where they're going to split and divide their
Oh,
colony and fly off. Yeah.
that was actually one of my questions about
Okay.
how they communicate.
Yeah.
So they don't actually, not that they talk, but what did you say? Different ways that they communicate?
Yeah. One is through dance
What do you mean
and
by that? What do you mean dance?
da-
I'm sure you don't mean like dance.
I do, yeah, I mean dance. So they what one like for example, one of their dances is called the waggle dance. And so one forager will go out and say, all right, girls, I found a patch of bluebonnets. This is the place we're gonna forage. We have to focus our attention here. This is where the nectar is. This is where the life will continue, right? We are guardians of life itself. We have to go here. Well, how is she gonna tell them that?
Right.
What she's, oh, cute. What she's going to do is go fly through all of, the fields and through the trees and over the streams and get back to her hive. And when she goes in, she's going to go in a straight line. And as she's going in her straight line, she does this waggle. So she's shaking the whole way down the line. And then she's going to turn right and waggle again, turn left, waggle down the center line. And she's doing this figure 8 kind of pattern. And what that will show them, the other bees, is hey, we need to go this direction for this long. And she has accounted for the sun setting, where the sun's position is going to be. And she has accounted for the wind resistance for the older bees, the older ladies that are going to take, it's going to be harder for them to get there than maybe the younger forager bees. And all of that is conveyed in the angle that she is doing her waggle dance. Isn't that
That,
wild?
that's crazy. I mean, that's just crazy.
I know.
So I figured there's no question that's a stupid question, but I was wondering how long have bees been around?
How long have they been around?
I mean, have they
Well,
been here since the beginning of time? How long have they been here?
Well, we had, let's see, the first cave paintings were in Spain, and I should look it up so that I don't say the wrong thing. But yes, that I mean, they are ancient creatures. The first cave paintings, gosh, I should know that date. I have it in a presentation, but I don't know off the top of my head. And then from there, the first managed bees were in the Egyptian civilizations. So we start to see like the art change around ancient Egypt, and they're starting to manage bee colonies. They're starting to ship their own dead in vats of honey, right, for preservation. And
Okay.
so, maybe that helps a little bit.
Yeah, like, yes, a long, long time for sure. A
Yeah.
long, long time. So that's interesting to me. I was
Yeah.
just curious about that. So, what do you think some of the misconceptions about bees are?
Well, one is that they're native. They're not native. They're the bees that we have here are from England and from South America, and there's also lineage genetics from Asia. So there are no native honeybees in North America. So what we manage when we're managing honeybees is Apis mellifera, and so that is when we're managing those bees, that puts a load on the native pollinators, right? That I think is often misconceived, right? Another big, huge misperception is what is honey. um, so honey, right? There's no truth in labeling. There's no laws around it. The legislation is very muddy. You can call something honey that isn't honey, just like olive oil, just like orange juice. There's a lot of um, room for things to not just be pure raw honey. So when a bee is going to pollinate, right, let's say the almond fields, a lot of the commercial beekeepers are going through treatment, like they're treating their bees with chemicals, and that's necessary for those large numbers. Whereas like some of the backyard people or the people that have less numbers, maybe they don't feel like they have to treat with chemicals, but they're bringing these chemically treated bees to the organic almond fields, and they're the is the is organic almond milk actually organic if you're putting a whole bunch of pesticides and chemicals on your bees that are then pollinating all of the sources? So people have mixed feelings about that. um
Say that because I was at the grocery store actually the other day, and knowing I was going to be talking to you, and I was looking at the honey and I was looking at the labels, and every one of them said 100% honey,
right.
100%. I was like, what's that mean? That's all it said was 100% honey.
Yeah.
So very vague.
And
And
it
yeah,
doesn't have to be. They could have put fructose corn syrup in. They could have put sugar water in. There's no honey police that's saying this is actually honey. So it's just really kind of one of those Wild West foods. And that's why I think it's good to know your beekeeper and know their practices and know, are they treating chemically, and know, what are their practices like? And does that align with your idea of honey? you know?
yeah, yeah. Good
Yeah.
point for sure. So, one of my favorite questions: what is the biggest health benefits of honey?
Oh my gosh. So, Dr. Ferhat
Where do you start?
Öztürk, he's one of our Turkish researchers here at UTSA. He has done so much for the research of honey, right? For the medical health benefits. And some of the stuff that he has come up with is, his team is just, I think, really incredible that we've been able to discover that in our lives. Some of them include like there's been some case studies on um, a young man in particular. He was in his 20s and he was having to do a series of amputations. He was diabetic, and they just kept having to take more and more. And at the time of complete surrender, they were willing to do a study, and the study, they used a honey wash, a medical grade honey wash, and it stopped all of the infections. It stopped the staph, it stops the superbugs. Honey is antimicrobial, antiviral. It's to me, it's the best medicine on earth. Everything in the hive is medicinal, but honey, right? Like if you use a little warm water with your honey, it helps things digestive system move things through. If you use cold water, it helps plug things up. So if you need, a natural laxative or something that stops things up, you can use honey with cold or hot water, depending. So you can use it topically. You can use it for anti-inflammation. You can use it for regulating sugar. You can use it for it's antioxidant. And so the antioxidant and the anti-inflammatory properties are really what help with the larger diseases where inflammation is the problem, right? But yeah, like you have a sore throat, you do a gargle. So you need to expose that area with a gargle of salt of honey water.
My
Yeah,
grandma
I
always
drink.
did honey and lemon.
Yes,
I was a
yeah,
kid. Oh, my grandma, yeah, honey and lemon for sure. So,
yes.
and how many different things? I mean, you've already besides just eating
Hmm.
that you use honey for.
Hmm. Oh, beauty products. People use it for clearing up acne, like topically on the face. I make a lip balm sometimes with like the beeswax. And so I was saying like everything in the hive is medicinal. It's not just honey that you're eating or using topically. You can also use the beeswax to make salves, of course, healing balms. The bee air is really popular. So on our retreats, I just met with some of my colleagues here last night. They have a bee air, a healing bee house. And so you go in and you breathe the air that the bees are around.
Does
And
does it smell different?
it smells different and it has a healing effect. And it's all well researched. It's not just woo woo. There's also the sound. They're in the key of C, and so there's been a lot of research done with the humming of the hive in the key of C with specifically veteran populations. And so people that are experiencing PTSD that are veterans have gone through a series of studies that have shown that just being in the colonies, just listening to the bees hum has a meditative and sedative type effect where it's positive for the outcome of their PTSD.
I had no idea they had a specific note.
Yeah.
And
And you'll get to know it too.
they all have the same note too? And
Yeah.
if you were to go anywhere, it's all the same note?
It's the
Isn't that
key of
interesting?
C. Yeah. Apis mellifera.
Have you used that background in your retreats? I see you do the yoga. Have you does part of the yoga, teaching
So
yoga?
So what I like to do with that is just suit people up. Not everybody's comfortable handling bees or holding bees, but if you are suited up and you are protected and you're safe and we have the smoke going and the bees don't care what smoke you use. The smoke is telling them, "Hey, don't cast out your alarm pheromone that says, 'Hey, we're in danger.'" So you basically mask that alarm pheromone when you're using a smoker, and a lot of beekeepers, I mean, you use different things for your smoker, but I like to be kind of, I don't know. It doesn't matter to the bees, but I like to use sage or I like to use Palo Santo or a little bit of frankincense in there. And I like to make it an experience, right? So the smoke that's coming out as we're walking out towards the hives with a retreat group, right? We are approaching with much reverence, with much respect, with much like a bowing of the heart. And that smoke clears things for us, and then you go in and you're listening and you're doing your meditation with that background frequency, and people have really profound experiences. Now, you won't get stung if you are in the proper suit and attire and everything. However, if you do get stung, apitherapy has a lot of benefits. Apitherapy is basically bee venom, BVT, bee venom therapy, and you can apply it to meridians on purpose to affect healing. So
Really?
there are entire groups of people like the Lyme community, and they have the Lyme community and part of the cancer communities. They use bee venom therapy to fully overcome things that the medical community failed them with, right?
Wow.
So yeah, bee venom. So it's not so bad if you do get stung. Now I had a really itchy, inflammatory, response for the first 4 years. And then at the fifth year, I turned a corner and it's just like a a mosquito bite. I mean, it's like nothing. Like a mosquito bite's itchier.
Would
So
you get stung a lot? Did you
I
get
think
stung
you,
a lot?
I did. Yeah, I have been stung a lot. Last week I got 20 stings.
Oh God, no. Are you
Yeah.
serious? What?
Yeah,
Why?
they were my fault. But yeah.
Do they sense something or what?
I was working a particularly aggressive hive, and they don't necessarily want me in there managing them. And so I was in there doing management practices, again with reverence, and I practice slow beekeeping, and I'm gentle and quiet. I'm not jerking stuff around or squishing bees or being like really masculine in there, and it slows me down. I have to slow down. I'm a fast. They're a slow. So you have to adjust, but I had my the bottom of my suit I was kind of careless with, and then my shoe was untied, and so they got in through the bottom of my suit and crawled up my leg and got on my belly and started stinging my belly, and it really woke me up. So now when I'm with that particular colony and those genetics, I duct tape the bottom of my pants so they can't get up them.
You got to use better words than it really woke me up. My
Yeah.
goodness. No, no, no.
Yeah.
That's long. You were talking earlier about the different bees in different areas. I don't know if this is fictional, but I've always been told that you should use the honey in your area for better purposes for where you live at. Is that
Yeah.
true? You
Um,
understand
so
what I'm
I
saying?
I do, and I have a unpopular view of that. So the reason people think that local
Yes.
honey is good for allergies, um, it
Yes.
is, but it's not for the reasons that you would think. So it's good for allergies because it's anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and all of the things that honey is. But when you have allergies, usually it's to a wind-borne pollen that is not pollinated by the bees. So you have cedar allergies. Well, bees have nothing to do with cedar, so there's nothing in the cedar that's getting into the hive. So it's just kind of a misnomer, I think. Um, but it works for a lot of people. So when somebody says, "Oh my gosh, my grandson has allergies. We really need local honey. We're so glad we found you." I'm not going to have that approach, right? I'm going to say, "That's so great. I'm glad you've found something that's working for him. And let me give you a little more information about why it might be working," right? So
Right.
it's not for the reasons that you think, but it does absolutely help.
Yeah, okay, that makes total sense because I
Yeah.
have that quite often for sure. So you touched base a little bit about this, and I was wondering if you might go into a little bit more. Because you have so much going on. I mean, you have so much going on, and I don't even know how you built all of this because I said I was looking at your website and you've got it. It's down, it's beautiful, your retreats, everything you've incorporated just in a short amount of time. So how have the bees helped you with all of this?
Oh, interesting. You know, what I'm thinking of is my first colony. So this year, 2025, we have had the largest number of bee losses in our country ever. So this is a
Why?
low, right? That's the $1 million question. So I have an answer, but the research does not. So at this point, everybody has sent in their samples, they've sent in their data. The researchers are at the federal level have shut their labs down. They have the data, but they're not at a point where they've shared the information yet. At a local level in Texas, we have a couple of really great organizations that are also collecting data and doing the research separately. So for that reason, you're asking, how have the bees helped me? Well, my first colony I bought from what I thought was a treatment-free facility, but that was not the case, and they did not disclose that. And so, my first colony had what you would call a synergistic effect of chemicals. And so, they had chemicals in the wax that over time compounded and then created kind of like a chemical blow up. And so, I walked out to this huge dead bees everywhere, drunk looking bees, wobbly bees everywhere, flying. It was really sad, really. And then as a first year beekeeper, you think that you've done something wrong, which is not the case at all. And so I approached, the person that I bought it from, and they didn't have anything to say. So I went ahead and did my research, and I sent my lab samples into Cornell, and they came back and they said, yeah, this is a synergistic effect of chemicals. Well, we don't have any chemicals, and there haven't been for 30 years on our property, nor the 1,000 acres around it. And so I'm like, something else is going on here. And they said, yeah, if there's apivar in the frames, if these bees have been treated or the frames have been treated before, it builds up. The wax in the colony is like the liver of our it filters. And so you need to refresh your wax you need to rotate your frames every 1 to 2 years, honestly. But the research from even Dr. Delaplane says that the naturally bees will leave after 5 years. They don't even want their own wax after 5 years. So they're going to relocate. So my first colony died. I found out the hard way that it wasn't my fault and that it was a chemical buildup. Okay. So all these years, right, in the back of my mind, you can do everything right. But if you're using wax that has a chemical buildup in it, it's going to result in a bee loss. Well, fast forward to this year when we have the most unprecedented numbers of bee loss, right? Texas usually sends 1.2 million colonies to California to do the almond pollination. And we are 1.2, and we are 300,000 colonies short. That's a major shortage. So the pollination in California will be affected, in North Dakota with the berries will be affected, in South Texas with the citrus will be affected, right? And so what they're looking at is like, there is amitraz or there is apivar in the frames, but what's being commonly shared is that, the bees are resistant to it. They have built up a resistance, and therefore it's not working. The mites have built up a resistance to it. And so now the mites are getting the bees, and they're dying from a viral situation. And
Wow.
I'm like the only one, so just forgive me, you guys do your own research, but I'm the only one that I know that feels like it's because of a synergistic chemical buildup effect that we have this massive colony loss, and we will continue to have that every 5 to 8 years.
Is there ever a point you think they would be extinct?
Well, if those bees, so the way that I would want us to address it would be through genetics, right? Through a genetic line instead of having to use chemicals, right? We want to make stronger bees, healthier bees, but our commercial bees have a hard time getting ahead because it's like me saying, "Hey Nancy, can you move to Alaska and only eat hot dogs for the next 6 weeks and do your very best work? And then when you're done with that, we're going to move you over to Aruba, and all you can eat is ice. That's it. There's no nutrients. You just have ice." And it's like, when you can't get ahead, even if you were in school and you had to move every 6 weeks, you could never get ahead. And so we're moving them. They're having they're pollinating a monocrop. They're not getting the full spectrum of nutrients, and then we're moving and moving and moving them, right? Whereas the people like in my position, we're not moving bees at all. We're just pollinating for a local community, and they're getting a full spectrum of nutrients based on what we have, based on our flora and fauna, and not based on some syrup that I have decided that they should have this nutrient and that nutrient and this essential oil, and I fed them. Like they're just working the nectar of the gods, right? They're just working what's going on in the land. And I'm not saying that one way is better than the other. I have friends that are commercial beekeepers. It is a business. It is keeping America's food on the table. So that's just my personal perspective, which is very unpopular.
Well, you're allowed to have your opinion, though. So,
Yeah.
what is our soil without bees?
Right. So the soil, it's dry, and it's lifeless without the plants that are in it. So the fact that we have bees that are pollinating, you can taste honey. You could do a whole honey sensory class, right? And understand what nutrients are in the soil. There's a connection between the soil terrain and the terroir, right? The flavors that go into the food and that go into the honey. It's just really cool to start studying that connection, and to do honey sensory classes and to taste that and to see, okay, like you might be having some soil deficiencies in this department or this area, and how the bees in the plant world naturally communicate to monitor and to affect changes for improved soil health so that all of them are thriving. There are scientific studies on flower consciousness where a flower will like light up and say, like, there's a bee flying over the flower and the flower emits a certain frequency and says, hey, I've got nectar down here, we need you to come get it, right? And so the bee will be like, great, thank you. And then once that nectar is gone, that frequency is not being emitted anymore, so all of the other bees fly over it, and they're like, okay, we're not being broadcasted. This flower doesn't need us. They're not wasting any time. It's a very efficient communication strategy between what's being pollinated and the bees. And so the same thing for the soil.
And listening to you talk, it sounds like they are just like light years ahead of us. We might be having AI and all that, but the bees sound like they're way far advanced than all of this. It's amazing. It's just amazing.
And I think it helps when you are in the bees. It increases your intuition. It helps you slow down. It makes you be in the present moment. And that's some of the most healing medicine of all,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Makes you breathe.
So my last question for you, what is the most important things the bees have taught you on your spiritual journey?
Oh, okay, that's sweet. So one time I was in that colony, and I was in the field, and I was just like, I don't know, I wasn't really trying to connect. I was upset that I felt like was trying to do a good thing, and then all these bees are dead, right? And so what I heard was, you know, you can't control that any more than this patch of flowers dying. This is a seasonal thing, right? This is not your fault. You can't affect that. And there's like I don't know, there was a sense of relief that I was part of a natural cycle of birth and death that I got to witness, and that I got to be in reverence to and be in service to. To me, that was a really special moment because I felt like the relief came directly from them in a way. And it just allowed me to be a better steward of the bees, because I know that all I'm ever going to be able to do is my best. And, sometimes that cactus is going to die in the window, right? Like sometimes.
Just
yeah.
Life lessons.
So many life lessons with the bees. Yeah.
Well, this has been so educational, and I'm sure everybody that's listening will find it fascinating too. If you have any questions for Tiffany, please post any comments or questions you might have, and she'll go back and answer them, because I certainly won't. I'm not going to say that this has convinced me that I want to put a suit on and come into your bees. I don't think that'll be happening to me.
Yeah, you don't have to. But if you trust your suit, right, you're going to be safe. Nothing, and you'll get to experience the magic of the bees. It's just completely spellbinding.
I'll have to remember the C sound as being more healing rather than scaring the heck out of me every time I hear the sound of a bee. I'll think about that also. Well, thank you so very much for joining me today. You've been a pleasure as always, and I know you're busy, so thank you for taking the time for being with me. And thank you all for being here this evening and for listening to our conversation. This is the official page of the Lilydale Assembly, so check back here for everything that's going on here in Lilydale. I'm sure we got our share of bees here running around Lilydale also. We got a lot of workshops, and our season will be starting in June, and everything's on the website, so check back for that. My page, Wellness with Nancy Lombardo, my Instagram, nancy.k.lombardo. Your website again, Tiff?
HaciendaHarelik.com.
Okay, so check that out. It has everything that she's doing with the bees and retreats, and you can buy, and it's great. So thank you so much. My name is Nancy Lombardo. I am protecting and serving your well-being, everybody. Thank you, and good evening. Thank you, Tiff.